Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sanitation Squeeze, a live webinar about protecting food safety and driving performance when the pressure is on. I'm Tricia Ryan, VP of Marketing at Culture Advisory Group, and I'm going to be your moderator today. We've got a great session, and it's all about managing a sanitation team and overseeing quality systems and the front lines of what's going on in food safety, as well as giving you lots of suggestions of things that you can do to help develop and keep a food safety culture alive and well in your organization. So the session, just sort of the details here, is being recorded and it will be available to all registered attendees. Please submit your questions anytime using the Q&A on this recording, and we will address them at the end. And feel free to use the chat to connect with fellow attendees. So as we begin to go through this program, I would like to do a little bit of a sponsor acknowledgement. First, we have the Culture Advisory Group, who is the host of this session. And most important is our goal here is to enable founders, entrepreneurs, and corporate leadership teams to predictively uncover risk, make strategic decisions, and build systems that proactively prevent events that negatively impact your business. We are a global food organization where risk is understood, managed with prediction, and treated as a core part of how our business operates and grows. And now, as we move through, I want to thank Food Processing Skills Canada for their support. And I know they do a fabulous job in the development of workforce excellence across the food industry. We also have Charlotte Products, a trusted name in professional cleaning and sanitation chemistry. And then finally, a warm thank you to JDL Builders, building with you for their continued support of the industry and learning and professional development. Now let's move on to our presenter. He is someone who doesn't just know food safety, he lives it. Sean Berdan is the Senior Sanitation Advisor at Culture Advisory Group, and he is the owner of CleanOps Quality Consulting, where he offers full service auditing, training, and audit prep to facilities across the industry. He's a Western University graduate with a lot of certifications, to name a few: SQF, HACCP, PCQI, Safe Start, and CFIL. Now, Sean is known for getting on the floor with teams, building stronger food safety cultures, and making real lasting improvements to sanitation performance. So please join me in welcoming Sean. Sean, it's a pleasure to have you here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tricia, and thank you, Culture Advisory Group, for allowing me to talk to people today. So good day and welcome to today's webinar on the Sanitation Squeeze, the pressures that are forcing companies to reshape their sanitation program. Let's get right into a poll question. Does your sanitation team deliver consistent, timely, standards-driven results every single time? Yes or no?
I will give this a minute, Sean, to see what people say. It's some coming in. Wow. So right now we've got no at 100%. Any thoughts on that?
It's not anything that I was shocked by. I understand the pressures of sanitation, and everybody wants to be perfect every time, and unfortunately, rarely do you get that. I think about Dave Stieb and his book. He was a famous pitcher for the Blue Jays. Tomorrow I'll be perfect, and that's what everybody hopes is tomorrow we'll get sanitation perfect. Okay, let's jump right into a second poll question. So what is the biggest roadblock that your sanitation team encounters that prevents this desired outcome, that 100% compliance every time? Is it lack of skill and or people, budget constraints, or the window to clean and sanitize is too small?
So once again, we're watching the numbers come in. This is interesting. They're kind of moving around here, but lack of skill for 20%, budget constraints 40%, And window to clean and sanitize is too small, 40%. So what do you think of those numbers?
Again, for this question, I believe that if people could vote for more than one answer, they'd vote for more than one, maybe all three. Again, I think that people in this particular question are choosing the one that is number one for them. Again, like I say, I think that even if your choice was lack of skill or lack of people, you probably are thinking, well, our budget's not big enough, and that's why we have lack of skill and lack of people, and our window. I think the lack of time would be everybody's concern. I don't think in the industry today there's anybody that's giving the amount of time that they think they need to clean properly. So very interesting, but not unfamiliar to me. So, okay, the sanitation squeeze. So the mission, whether you choose to accept it or not, is to protect food safety and ensure the quality products for consumers. So here are the three main pressures that are squeezing your sanitation program and making it increasingly difficult to do this. So we're looking at a smaller team with less skill, tighter budgets, and decreased intervals for cleaning and sanitizing. And these are all compressing your ability to get that 100% and your ability to do it in a timely manner and prevent all issues. So when we think of it, number one, shrinking teams, sanitation teams, and the loss of skill base. So the legacy approach to sanitation was in a time with softer standards and everything was reactionary in nature. Companies followed their HACCP program. They had boilerplate SSOPs. A couple did the entire plant, a couple of SSOPs. They devoted an entire 8-hour shift to cleaning and sanitizing while using just a ton of water. And the head count for cleaning was the same as during production. So it was so plentiful that people practically stood on top of one another. The validation process for cleaning was solely based on visual and odor assessment. Now today, companies are required to use GFSI benchmark systems that are more predictive and preventative. These regulations include FSMA and Safe Food for Canadians regulations. SSOPs have become highly specialized for each piece of equipment. Sanitation cycles have been reduced to increase production output, creating a do more with less scenario. Validation now consists of rounds of swabbing for ATP for immediate, TPC for your longer, and your environmental monitoring programs. So again, to continue with our shrinking skill base and teams, in the legacy approach, sanitors did one task and they were in the position for their entire career or most of their career, building a significant knowledge of the equipment that they cleaned, learning all the niche points and the best ways to get that equipment clean. They had tons of time. They were not taxed. And this allowed them to, and this is why they stayed in the position. Today, however, the job of sanitor is now seen as an entry-level task, often paid less, and employees move from this position as quickly as possible. They never get to gain or pass along the cleaning skills and knowledge to the next employee. This causes mistakes to become much more likely. To combat the turnover on the sanitation teams, we must look at changing the mindset about sanitation, moving away from it being an entry-level position. How do we accomplish this? We need to elevate the pay scale. They are as important as the operator running the line. They need comprehensive training, not just the how to clean, but the why they're cleaning. And we need to build the culture of your sanitation program and enhance the sanitary design. One of the best ways to improve your culture is by celebrating the sanitation wins rather than emphasizing every error. The next pressure is smaller budgets. Why is the sanitation budget shrinking? Well, in the eyes of senior management, sanitation is strictly seen as a cost and does not make the company any money. It's a sad thought, but it's really the way it's viewed. And only in hindsight, with the closing of a fiscal period, does sanitation show its potential value. This is in the fact that there have been no withdrawals and no recalls of product. Now, why are budgets shrinking? Again, because every year the costs for sanitation in a facility rise without direct payback. In the food industry, across all jobs, the hourly compensation for employees has risen by an average of 4.3%. In talking with many sanitation leaders as they're trying to maintain their group, the increase specifically for sanitation has been much higher as companies want that continuity and to retain knowledge on their cleaning teams. Add to this the average cost for chemical compounds, which have risen by 2.5% to 4.5% due to the limited supply of certain ingredients. This has been exacerbated since the time of COVID, where we focused more on cleaning chemicals to get rid of COVID, and we have not gotten back to the levels that are needed for the regular cleaning chemicals. Also, the cost for providing sanitation team with tools needed for performing the duties has increased. And we're talking specifically about PPE, their rain gear, their brushes, their scrub pads. These items have all gone up. Finally, the biggest increase is in repairing the aging sanitation equipment, as parts, if they are still available, have surged by upwards of 21%. So what does this mean? Well, even if your budget stays static year over year, the actual amount that you have for sanitation shrinks. A really good example of this is an operating budget of $100 million a few years ago, with a sanitation budget of 10 million or 10%, is at today's value only really giving you 9.3% of that budget to spend on sanitation, all due to the aforementioned increases. You must also factor in the increased fuel and delivery costs, which have surged in recent months. The end result is that every dollar for sanitation is worth far less than it was in the past. So now we've arrived at the paramount influence that is putting the squeeze on your sanitation program, the shrinking window of time allotted to prepare the facility for production. Why is this window shrinking? Well, the increased demand from consumers and the intensified efficiency ultimatum from senior management is causing this squeeze. So now we've arrived at poll question number 3. What is the primary business pressure most responsible for compressed sanitation schedules in the food processing industry? Is it A, increased demand, B, new efficient production equipment that allows for maximizing uptime, 3, cost reduction pressures, reduced sanitation costs, reducing changeovers, or D, pressure to minimize production downtime and maximize throughput?
So again, I'm watching the numbers come in, Sean. Give it a few more minutes because they're kind of moving up and down. It's interesting. Increased demand? No, nothing. New efficient production equipment allows for maximizing uptime? No, nothing. cost reduction pressures, 20%, and then that's 80% to minimize production downtime and maximize throughput. So is this what you've been seeing when you've been going into facilities, Sean?
Yes, it's. I think that's the most when you talk to people, that's the most direct one, is the pressure to minimize production downtime and maximize throughput. However, when you dig deeper and talk with people, again, I think that in this case, if people could vote for more than one, they would probably combine a couple of them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not surprised that nobody said increased demand. But, in talking with people, that is one of the things that they talk about. It's just not the most pressing factor. It's, production. Our SLT team, our plant management team, every second of downtime is costing us money. So, we got to push to keep that line running. We got to push to make our case count every day. So I think that's, it's not unusual that is the number one factor. So what are the key elements that can fail with smaller cleaning window? Well, one is the pressure created by reducing the allotted time is a failure to meet regulatory compliance. And it can be little things: missed chemical titrations, unsigned documents, sanitors skipping steps in your written SSOPs. These are all items that will cause the leadership group aggravation and audits. I can't tell you how many times, even when I was the person going into audit, that standing there with an SSOP in hand and watching the person perform the job, and they combine two tasks at the same time that clearly said, do this, and they're skipping down and doing this and then moving backwards. So, again, it's a minor on an audit, but those minors add up quickly. The second thing is rushed sanitation practices lead to increased customer complaints. Missed bits of a different product. So you finished running carrots, and now after sanitation, you start up on peas, and you see a little bit of orange in a bag. That's a big issue, right? Off smells in your product, and pieces of cleaning equipment found in packaged goods will all cause the quality department a multitude of headaches. Again, I think about a great example for this is somebody does a sanitation, and 2 hours later they do a bag check and find a bit of a scrub pad in that bag of product because it got left on a piece of equipment and it went into the product and got chewed up, and now your whole run is on hold because you have no idea where all the pieces of that scrub pad are. So we got to take that into account, that with the power of social media, customer complaints are far more likely to impact your business today than over 20 years ago. Now it's snap a picture, couple words, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, 1 million people know in 2 minutes. So, and the third thing is the compressed time frame allows for a greater chance of product contamination through biofilm buildup, poor chemical application coverage, and incomplete rinsing. And this can create havens for microorganisms to thrive in niche areas on your equipment. So how can you combat this? There are two keys. One is automation, and the other is risk-based assessments of your sanitation protocols. And this has been very slow to happen in our industry as the upfront costs of automation gouge away at an already shrinking budget. Additionally, replacement parts for most of the automation out there are very expensive. And these robotic systems are not a simply set it and forget it program. They need to be monitored and they need to be calibrated often. And then there's the possibility of contamination through nuts and bolts, etc., falling off with little to no oversight because there's not a person there anymore. So when completing a risk-based assessment, the best place to start looking to automate is with those tasks that provide little value in having an employee spending time doing that task. And a great example of this is an open conveyor belt. Having an employee spend 25 minutes doing an initial rinse, 10 minutes applying detergent, 10 minutes scrubbing once the detergent is applied, and another 15 minutes doing a post rinse is not a good use of an hour. You could add a spray bar to perform most of this task and redistribute that employee to more critical and difficult pieces of equipment to clean. Another very good example is with parts cleaning. Using a COP tank rather than an employee to clean each part by hand. The COP tank will give you much better results, much faster, and with less chance of recontamination due to overhandling. Add to that today the COP tanks all have PLCs on them, and there's your validation and verification that you had your proper concentration, your proper amount of time, and your proper temperature. So those are all great reasons and little bits that can add to your timing. So now we're really at the time where we're going to summarize the mission. So in summary, with all the added pressures causing the sanitation squeeze, companies need to become nimbler and more strategic. Just like production teams have spent capital on becoming more efficient and increasing output through advanced smart equipment, we must look at sanitation with the same mindset. The need is there to migrate to a risk-based platform and automate tasks with little value. Companies need to take a holistic approach to investment. And this means that expenditures are required not just in technology, but also in employees. Gone are the days where loyalty to a position or a company exists. If we want a highly skilled, knowledgeable, and adaptable sanitation team, we must invest in both training and technology as the workforce shrinks to maintain a competitive advantage. And that training has to teach them not only how to clean properly, but why they're cleaning properly. They need to understand the microorganisms and what happens if a product is contaminated. And this goes even further. This goes to your documentation and reporting. Sanitation at most places uses 4 to 6 different documents per night to document what's being done. And if you want a good supervisor and manager running your program, they don't have time to sit in the office to print documents and chase employees for signatures, let alone take those 6 documents and collate all that information to look for gaps. There's great software out there now to create reports in real time for you. And spending for that is as important as spending for that same software for production and quality. So I think now we're at the time where we're open for questions and answers, or questions, and I'll try and give you some answers.
That was great, Sean. Thank you. Very insightful. Feels a bit polarizing. Things are up, less time. People expected to do more. So I can see where the challenge is on this. And I keep thinking about the food products that are in my home, and I take it for granted that all that back end is being taken care of. So I do see that we have a couple of questions here. Our first one is really about, call it getting started. And as you know, with Culture Advisor Group, we do have a fair number of people that are moving in the entrepreneurial space, challenger brands they're involved with, And they asked the question around, I'm starting out to get serious about sanitation programs. As you know, many of them might have been co-packing and they're evolving to their own systems now. So what's the first thing you would tell them to look at, and why, for someone who's setting a program up?
That's an excellent question. And I would say you start with your sanitation team. Whether you're a brand new facility or whether you're a well-established facility, what is the seniority of your team comprised of? If you're just starting up, look for a couple of people who are good at sanitation and cleaning. How well do they know their job? You need to invest in that team, right? Get them training, not just in how to perform the tasks, but why it is critical that they are performed properly. You can use your chemical supplier. They will give you the basic training in using chemicals, but don't be afraid to reach out to those in the industry that know cleaning well and invest in them. And again, it's not just in the how to clean, it's the why they're cleaning. And that's the crucial place. That's the A1 building block for your sanitation team.
So this kind of feeds into our next question, which is kind of the human side of it. You've talked about the why for people. Obviously, we don't want to have business risk, people get sick, or consumers complaining, as you pointed out, with social media. But with these compressed times and shrinking teams, so how can we keep the sanitation staff motivated, other than threats or we lose business if people get sick? What's the positive part that those people should feel and want to make it career positions?
I think that it's another great question. The margins for error are razor thin, and to keep everybody motivated, you got to celebrate the wins, right? Set goals, and when goals are met, reward them. It doesn't have to be anything big, but realize that production celebrates a record day. So 30 days of passing swabs should be just as important. In a former life, I moved into a sanitation leadership role where our program was struggling greatly. So I took 30 days to just look at the processes and everything else and watch pre-ops in the morning, see how the QA staff were swabbing, what their standards were. And then I sat down with my team and I challenged them. I said, we're at 78% on pre-op passes, first pass every day. We need to get better. So I'm giving you guys the challenge that we need to get to 85%. You guys get to 85%, I'll bring in coffee and donuts on a Friday night when we're a little less pressed for time for everybody. And lo and behold, everybody picked it up a little bit. They started paying more attention to what the QA techs were showing them. And they were making sure that the next day that spot couldn't be found. And it took about 6 weeks, but we got it up to 85%. And so we celebrated that. And then you take that the next step. Okay, we're going to go to 88%, but not just we're going to go to 88%. We have to maintain 88% for 30 days. And, it creates a lot of buy-in, and people want to do a good job. And when they're recognized for doing a good job, it makes them want to stay. It makes them feel good about the job that they're doing. So I think that that's, the key. You want to create a cohesive and team and continuity in your team and keep people there. You got to celebrate just like production does.
And those are some interesting perspectives, in that people do want to do a good job, and giving them reasons to want to do that, I think, is really important. So now we have budget reality. When a quality or sanitation manager is facing budget constraints, and you certainly pointed out a number of them, just the cost of things, and then fuel and getting things to organizations, has just gone up and up. Is there, in your particular role when you're consulting and working with these clients, do you recommend things they do to protect spending and where it's safe to look for efficiencies? I mean, if the price goes up on something, do they just shop it out and get another one? What goes on there, and what are suggestions that you give, Sean?
Well, unfortunately, I think the first thing that most companies look at, and it's not your sanitation manager or your quality manager, it's the overall plant management with pressure from your SLT, is that companies look at cutting people and therefore reducing what gets cleaned during the sanitation cycle. And a great example of this is I was in a plant and they decided to move their drain and floor cleaning out of their sanitation cycle and into production time. And this is probably the most grievous error I've ever seen. It's far more dangerous to your product and your reputation, because using that pressure water to clean floors, to clean drains, can cause aerosolization and overspray of contaminants. And I did some testing back in my last role. We got some specialty paper that showed us time lapse on aerosolization of water. We just used, we laid these papers out every 10 feet for 150 feet, and they colored, and the color would fade by the time it took to land. So 200 psi water sprayed directly on the floor, went as far as, with aerosolization, went as far as 110 feet and took almost 4 hours to land. So even when you're doing sanitation, doing drain and floor cleaning at the very end of that, 4 hours into production, that water, that aerosolization is landing back on your equipment. So big mistake to move drain and floor cleaning out of your sanitation cycle and into production. So one of the things that, again, I think is most critical, how can you save some money? How can you redistribute that budget? Look at your labor pool and add some low-cost spray bars and take people out of those low-value tasks, such as rinsing conveyor belts, shaker tables, and augers, and move them into the more critical. Yes, they'll still have to go and they'll have to connect the hose to the spray bar. They'll have to connect your applicating wand to the spray bar for your detergent. But again, we talked earlier about it being an hour to perform that task. Maybe that person has to be there for 5 minutes of that hour, right? And it gives them now 55 minutes to work on something more critical. So that's the way that I'd look at it. Don't cut important things out and move them into production cycles, but use your money wisely and take some low value tasks and automate them with simple solutions.
It's an interesting story, but you can see where someone thought they were making things more efficient and not thinking about then the food safety aspect. So in terms of audit readiness, I hear so many complaints about the auditors coming, or comments around the auditors coming. So what are the kinds of things that can catch a team off guard? And what are the most common gaps that you've seen in your history, which seems to be long and intense in this particular area?
Well, I think that, people hear, okay, here comes our SQF or here comes our BRC auditor. We're 60 days out. So plants spend so much time performing extra cleaning based on last year's results and making sure that their documentation is on point for an audit. And this often, brings up the point, shouldn't your plant always be audit ready? The best facilities out there treat every day like audit day. They are prepared for somebody to walk in with no notice at all to do an audit. And that's where everybody should strive to be. But some of the little things that I've done when working as a corporate food safety, sanitation, and quality manager is I'll sit in on the opening meeting with the auditor. And then while they're starting to do a little look through paperwork, I'll go and walk the floor. And some of the things I've seen are, you walk around and production's going on, you open an operator's toolbox and you find he's got his car keys and his wallet and his cigarettes are there in his toolbox. If an auditor sees that, they're going to automatically think, well, those cigarettes could end up in a package of product. So it's a simple thing, right? Are the tools clean? Maintenance tool carts are another great example. Maintenance gentlemen do an awesome job. They're tasked with keeping everything running. And if it does go down, getting it going as quickly as possible. But they could be anywhere in the plant. They could be on the roof looking at a cooling unit. They could be, if you're in a live receive meat facility, they could be down in the live receive area 1 minute and they're in the packaging room the next minute. Are those tools getting cleaned between calls? Again, every maintenance guy, when you look at his tool cart, he's got a hammer with a wooden handle. Wood cannot be cleaned. Once it's contaminated, it's contaminated. And the other thing is, watch how the processes are performed on the floor versus how they are written in documentation. Take an SOP, because auditors do this, and they'll go out on the floor and they'll watch, is the person following, line for line, the way it's written in the SOP. And often, I'm not saying the operators don't know their jobs. They know them very well, but often, they're doing their own little twists to things, or they think that doing it a slightly different way saves them a bit of time. So if they're not following the SOP, again, there you've got a non-conformance. So the other one is tiny GMP violations are also quite common. A great example of this is something's happening on the line and something falls off the line and somebody bends over with their gloved hand and picks it up off the floor, maybe dips that piece of equipment back in the sanitizer, puts it back on the line, but they never changed their glove. They've now touched the floor. Those are all things that are just little things, but they're all small non-conformances, but they add up and they can, a number of them will cause you to fail your audit.
It's amazing, these little intuitive things we do as human beings and the implication. So if we were to look forward and look ahead, what are going to be perhaps some of the biggest shifts that you're going to see in food safety and sanitation expectations? And how can teams begin to start preparing?
I think that, your plant management team, they need to look at production. There's still way too many production people that think that sanitation staff are there to clean up after them. The best facilities have production teams who try and maintain the cleanliness of the floor and the equipment throughout the entire production cycle and leave no packaging, no bits of product lying around at the end of their shift. You have to change that mindset. Sanitation is not there to clean up after production. Sanitation is the first step in production. And I can't say that enough. So again, sanitation is not to clean up after production. It is the first step in production. And we have to get that into everybody's mind, right? They need to hand the floor over to sanitation, ready for them to get ready to resume production. And a great example of this is I worked for a pork processor, and it used to be they had a plant manager on day shift, they had a plant superintendent on afternoon shift, and the sanitation team was constantly complaining to me about the amount of product left on the line at the end. They'd run an extra hour, and none of the production people wanted to stay that extra hour. So the last piece came by at 53 minutes, and they're off the floor at 54 minutes, and there's still trimmings and bones and everything all over everything. Well, that takes time for the sanitation team to clean up. So I sat down with the superintendent, and we created a checklist, and we started walking the floor an hour before the end of production every day. And we would both sign off at the end of the walk that the floor was handed over to sanitation in an acceptable state for sanitation to start doing their job. Conversely, I would do the walk in the morning with the plant manager, and we would do the same thing. We would walk around and make sure that there were no chemicals left on the floor, no pieces of equipment, no hoses laying out, and that the floor was in acceptable condition for production to start. And that's a great key, and it's a great piece. If you can get all of your teams working together that way, it's going to help you adapt, and it's going to help you become error-free.
Sounds like a lot of work, but I guess it's as much mindset as it is the thoroughness and detail. And it's really quite amazing what those people are contributing to the total food ecosystem across this country. So, Sean, we're just about at time, and we're going to close this off. I want to thank everyone that's joined us today. A big, round of thanks to our sponsors, Food Processing Skills Canada, Charlotte Products, and JDL Builders. Their support makes these kinds of sessions possible. If you'd like to connect with Sean directly, you can reach him. I believe his contact information is here on the slide. And as well, you can get him through Culture and his own organization. And the recording of today's session will be sent to all registered attendees. Keep an eye out for your inbox. And if you found this valuable or have any questions, please feel free to share this. And that's a wrap on the Sanitation Squeeze. Stay safe, stay compliant, and thanks everyone for being here. Take care. And Sean, thank you very much. That was amazing. Really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Thank you, Tricia, and thank you, Culture Advisory Group, for this time. And thank you to our sponsors. Without them, it wouldn't be possible to help people gain the knowledge that hopefully they have today.
Great. Have a good day.